We have a few talking points to cover, unless anyone wants to kind of kick off with any. We should be friends, let's exchange numbers. And I know who they are, they're on my course, but like we're just desperate to make like friends and have these connections and friend groups. So I have all these numbers from random people who I exchange numbers with in Precious because I was sure we were going to be best friends and never kind of spoken.
Coming up with Newcastle, I didn't I, to see the intrinsic links between the drinking and partying culture and how being local as well, I felt like more kind of perhaps pressure at times to know where to go, what to do, and be that kind of like, you know, party kind of central thing. And at times, for my mental health, I need to zone out, you know, completely from the way it is, with knowing how it can be being out all the time in Newcastle and understand these things. And I just think it's like create this really niche way of like seeing both sides really of locality and all these, you know, great people come into university and how the pressure kind of manifests to this kind of panic situation that needs to be talked about within university and, you know, not university culture. Exactly.
I mean, I think.
Hang on, sorry. Dave, do you have a question?
No, I mean, that's my question.
Yeah. That's the session is meant to be kind of Q&A, but we decided to, but we have talking points if no one wants to ask us questions. So yeah, go for it, Dave.
Is there like a link between your perception of yourself should be having fun, you should be enjoying it as a student?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you're told you come to uni, it's the best days of your life. You'll make all your friends that you're gonna have the rest of your life. It's amazing new place.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, people don't really realise we spend billions of pounds on faculty a week, and that's not including, you know, the millions of clubs out here if you think you capitalize it upon it. So a lot of people are coming in. They're probably already, you know, a lot of people doing A level.
and it was just not my scene at the time. Stigma about talking about being on antidepressants, but other people do, and it's just quite an awkward conversation sometimes. And when I was there, they would do pre-drinking games in the flat before they went out. I was drinking's not really my thing, and it's not really been my thing anyway, but being on antidepressants, they tell you you shouldn't really drink, and some people are okay on it, but when I was on surgery, it was not a good time to be combined it with alcohol. It just never ended well. I ended up in total tears. It was horrible. And so I was like, oh, I want to join in, but I just felt like I couldn't, and the drinking, it's me who has to drink, someone else will have to drink it. It just didn't work out. And one day I was like, oh, I'm just going to join in. And after half an hour of joining their drink games, I was total crying mess. And then after that, I think they understood that I didn't and it got to the point where our flat was just incredibly hostile. Because I didn't go out with them, and I was saying about having like not very nice flatmates. They once came up to me and said, by the way, for second year we've got a flat together. I hope you don't mind, but you're not invited to join me. So they booked a flat for second year, but I wasn't coming. I don't want to live with them anyway.
People can be awful. Like I said, my flatmate covers my stuff in egg left in bags outside my room to skip over one. Like vote messages about me on the kitchen whiteboard.
I got that, yeah.
Oh, when I washed up my things, would put them back in the dirty dishwater, so I had to wash them up again, because isn't that hilarious? And just kind of made my life a bit of a hell, really.
Just to get back to social media, how it affects your life so much, I think it is an addiction in itself. You know, we're kind of living this life where there's two different senses of self, like you were talking about the social media world and this kind of reality, you know, whatever that is. But I think in terms of like on a governmental level and in terms of mental health legislation, I think it needs to be seen as an addiction, and as a society we should be talking more about the time we spend on it, and if there should be, you know, funding either way to kind of have a consensus that this is really affecting everybody's life, and it's not just a leisure activity, it's leading to real separation issues and anxieties. So maybe, I don't know what the audience thinks this as well. If it is, you know, I'd be interested to hear views on that as well. If it is an addiction or not.
Yeah, that's a question.
Did you all find social media created a pressure when you were in secondary school before you came to university as well? Because I work with young people in schools, and one of the big problems is the expectation that your life is perfect on social media. A huge one is bullying and racism. And I wondered whether you experienced this more at university, or if you found it equally as difficult before you came.
Yeah, I mean, I found it more at university, but I feel like when I was in, especially the early parts of secondary school, social media wasn't as much of a big thing, so I don't think it's quite as comparable. Yeah, I didn't get Facebook until a couple of years into secondary school, and I didn't have Twitter or Instagram or anything until sixth form, so definitely more of a problem now in university, but I don't know whether that's because I didn't use any of that, and just because it was so many years ago, it wasn't as much of a big thing, really. I don't know if
because you do get primary school children now,
that
I work with as well. So they start very, very young. So the pressure is there at a much younger stage.
I know a lot of the times with my friends who had really started to suffer quite early on in secondary school, a big part of it was this: am I normal? Even things like eating disorders developing, and you could tell that they were developing because the constant question was, how much are you eating all the time? You know, what do you eat on average? I think a big part now, I mean, social media again with me, I don't think really came into being an everyday part of my life until sixth form really, but I think that it is this element of checking everybody else's pages to kind of get this idea of normality and what's normal. And of course everybody's editing their lives, everybody's posting pictures of them at their happiest, when they're posting the pictures of their food at it looking its best. And so I think, yeah, now that it's actually entering where I never had my phone while I was in school, the fact that now primary school children are using it, I think we're starting these issues so much earlier.
I think
I didn't have a phone then.
I think it manifests in like more insidious ways, perhaps in university, where we're being conditioned, you know, as a society to, you know, appear the best and, you know, always be healthy in whatever way and being outgoing and doing these things. And in terms of, like you said, in primary school, it might be more that kind of name calling online or on group walls, but there's this kind of hierarchy maybe in university of people doing more more sustainable activities or more encouraging to everybody else and being better in that way. So I think it's to a different level, like who's the more active or proactive in different activism and different things. So
well, it depends on the social media platform as well, I guess, because I didn't really have Facebook when I was in school, and I only really got it at college, but I've been on YouTube and made YouTube videos since I was like 11 or 12. But all through that, the kind of comments that you get and the attention you receive is quite similar. It's like bullying, it's bullyish behaviour, because obviously I might look a little bit different or whatever, but they find a characteristic of that person and they target them because it's more anonymised. I guess on social media there's a name to the comment nowadays.
I mean, like, social media wasn't as much of a problem when I was in secondary school because I didn't really use it. But if it had been around to the extent that it is now, I think it would have affected me a lot. I had a lot of joint problems and was on crutches and in wheelchairs for about 4 or 5 of my secondary school experience, and I was bullied a lot for it. And if they'd had the social media platform they have now to say some of the things that they used to say in school, then definitely it probably would have been a lot more of a problem. Can we just take some of these questions? I think, sorry, Khalil right at the back put his hand up first, so I will come back. You want?
Social media, just being a brief point, that social media is a social, it's a good question, but it came out, at old life, but Computer Geek in the late 90s, ICQ and IRC, I don't know if anyone knows these kind of startups, and then comes the Yahoo messengers and MSN messengers and early 2000. This is my teen period, so we were quite creative about the internet cafe and all that kind of what happens at the time in the Middle East. Because I'm from Egypt, by the way, so not much. The social media played an important role, something like our experience, for example, to communicate with you. We wouldn't have these connections at all without it. So it came up with a need, or otherwise it couldn't be mobilized. What I'm trying to say is a tool. It can be used in a healthy way, but also is a manifestation of something more that's happening that we lost it at some point.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that it is about the way that you use it. I mean, for instance, there are lots of online resources specifically for mental health. One of the things that I've used is I've kind of promoted to people is an app called Calm Harm, which was developed to help teenagers with self-harm, but it just provides lots of different distraction techniques, essentially. And the same in Mind the Gap, we have an online support group, which is an extension of our support groups, and people can go in there, they can post coping mechanisms, it's moderated by a few people who can make sure that, it's safe and a healthy conversation. So it's very much about the way you use it, but equally it's about the culture that develops. I mean, specific to Newcastle Uni, we had, I don't know if anybody will remember it now, in first year there was an app called Yik Yak. And basically it was sort of an anonymous posting board based on your location on your phone. And so you could get everybody at Newcastle Uni, you could see everything that was going on, and literally nothing could be traced back to you. And so people could post pretty much anything they liked about anybody they liked on there. And it was a real problem in first year. We had part-time officers who were getting death and rape threats, essentially, and part-time officers who were already dealing with mental health difficulties who essentially were pushed into breakdowns because of it. And so and I remember my first year flatmates went down to campus because somebody from Yik Yak was selling branded t-shirts with the logo on it. So it's something that it's about the culture that develops, I guess, around it.
Take some more questions. Do you have a question?
My name's Ron, and I had the benefit of 40 years ago, I was a member of the NUSK Rights Committee. So at that time, I'm not quite sure I'm delving into history, but ancient history, but at that time, one tried to bring up LGBT, in fact, at that time it was called gay, issues and mental health issues. And the mental health issues were framed in terms of anti-psychiatry. Now, the NUS at that time didn't, and I don't know how much it does, try to bring those two things together, which is what this conference is about. When young people, including myself at that time, had having mental stress or bullying, sort of things you've described, we went to local gay organisations like Friend and others and they used to befriend young lesbian and gay people and bisexuals, I guess. And it seems to me there's no befriending system where people who are undergoing bullying, harassment, intimidation, embarrassment, shaming, blaming, all of those things can actually turn away from social media and turn towards each other for mutual support. We are expected as LGBT people to be angry, activist, effective, vocal, socially active in terms of the media and so on. We're not encouraged to support each other in just a very nicely intimate and friendly way. And I'm just putting that to you.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that. I think it all goes back to early years education as well, and that environment you create around education, around gay rights, social media and various different causes, where you can be educated into realising that you can have discussions with people without a phone involved, in your own personal space, if that's a safe space as well, or in a wider consensus. And I think people need to be kind of empowered into discussions without feeling the need to then put that online into very personal, sensitive stuff, which I can understand why people do that at times, to kind of reach out and get everybody else's opinions. But the way that information is being used in the media and in trolls and different things that have developed, through Twitter and Facebook and all these social media agents, there's no support, as you say, on a human level.
So what are we going to do about it?
I'd say I think it's educate. Sorry.
Just blaming social media, which is easy. You can all do that. Why isn't there a strategy about engaging with the pressures and with people who are new to Newcastle?
I think on a sort of micro level with Mind the Gap, that is sort of what you do, because like you were saying, activism seems to be about being angry and about shouting out there rather than talking amongst people. A big, this is probably, this is the big activism thing we do, but a huge part of what Mind the Gap does is we have, for instance, a weekly thing we call Positivity, where anybody is welcome, and it often gets people who aren't members, and people just come and sit in a coffee shop for 3 hours and just talk, and it doesn't have to be about mental health, it's just talking. I think that's a huge thing and I know, for instance, the LGBT Society themselves do a thing like that. So, I mean, there's an element with societies that I think is really trying to engage with people outside of social media and outside of activism and just sort of come together for the sake of it and kind of help people make those connections. But I think in first year for me, just getting out the door was the problem. It wasn't that this stuff wasn't out there and that I didn't know about it, but that I felt for some reason that I wasn't going to be accepted. And I think where that starts is sort of the very beginnings of first year, the very beginnings of freshers, and the environment that we foster in halls as well.
Mm-hmm. And here, a day like this, you're seeing students speaking out, because I think what you're saying is, we should also. A lot of students are vulnerable and can't feel that they can speak out, but people like us, we have that confidence and we feel that we are able to speak on behalf of people and raise awareness and be unapologetic for who we are. You should definitely stay for the next panel, because the next panel's LGBT specific panel, which would be really brilliant, because this is just a general one, but there's people like us, I do my own gender rights activism, LGBT activism. Every single person on this panel and a lot of the volunteers here today are unapologetic about who they are and who put themselves maybe sometimes outside of their comfort zone to be as frank and as open about mental illness as possible. And they do that on social media, try and break down that stigma slowly but surely.
Like people, can we take more questions?
So just going back to the point about the first year, the first week and making friends. Becoming a student living away from home is such a step change in someone's life. And if somebody said to me, if somebody said to me, next month, you'll be going to a new city, you've never been to before, you're not familiar with, you'll be living with people that you've never met, you choose to live with in close proximity, and you've got a week to make new friends. By the way, your friend book is wiped clean, these are all new people you've got to make friends with. I mean, I have a problem with that, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't need to take some medication after that, or have some counselling, because it's stress. It's a stressful thing, and it's not particularly natural. To do that. We do it in our country, but there's some countries where they don't have this move to a different city.
I think One thing that people don't realise is that, you know, you get your results in sort of the middle of August, and some people by, you know, I think in Newcastle we're lucky we maybe get early October we move. Some people are moving by September. So you're right. This it's 3 weeks to completely adjust to an entirely new way of life.
Yeah, it's very stressful. It takes its toll. Like by the end of my freshers week, I was in hospital with bronchitis because it had just taken such a toll on me. I mean, I think my body just doesn't like stress. Every time I've had exam periods, I've ended up in hospital. But yeah, it's
never really have
so
time
stressful.
off, can you?
Yeah.
I remember during my freshers week, you know, there was that expectation that I've got to go out every night, every single night. I remember one night, right, I thought, I'm going to take the night off, I'm going to order a takeaway, because it's the first time I'd seen that much money in my bank account for a long time. I had to open a bank account for university, so I was like, I'll take an evening off, I'll dye my hair, because my hair was brown, I was like, I'm going to dye it blue. It's been this way for a long time. And then then the fire alarm went off, and I had to walk outside with my gym jams and a Asda carry bag on my head, while everyone else was like coming out of the living rooms while they were preying. I was like, "You all right?" And that was the first time they'd seen me. So yeah, you can't really switch
there was
off.
just so much pressure. Like I said, I ended up in hospital with bronchitis, and even in the middle of the week when I was starting to get really unwell, they were like, "Oh no, just come to Prees. You can't be that ill, really." And I was like struggling for breath, couldn't breathe, really ill. Like, "Oh, you'll be fine. Prees is really important. If you don't go, no one will be your friend." It's like. We'll take some more questions.
I think a girl at the back. Sorry, you at the back.
Yeah. I just wondered if I could get some of your opinions on, like, the student, like the mental health services at the university, and not just at the university, but in Newcastle in general, because I've had experiences trying to access them, and it's not been amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if any of you guys have seen.
I mean, I'll kick off.
Yeah, go
I will keep calm. I had CBT, another therapy in first year through the NHS Talking Helps, and I wasn't on a waiting list for that long in first year, and I found it very helpful. My therapist was lovely. It really helped after everything that happened. But then this year, like I said at the beginning, I've been on a waiting list since last July with nothing in the future. Since last July, my mental health got so bad that I had to take 2 months off uni. Self-harmed a lot, had a suicide attempt, and they're still just like, "You're on the waiting list. It'll be okay at some point." And then through the university, the waiting list was a lot smaller. They offered me a time, and they were like, "Okay, we have this time for you." And I said, that's kind of in the middle of the day. I'm a medical student. Everything's compulsory. They're already not very happy with all the time that I took off. If I miss any more time, they're going to make me repeat the year. Can I have a different time? And they're like, "No, this is your time. Either you have it or you get discharged from services." So I didn't get university help.
I believe student wellbeing at Newcastle Uni have massively increased at the moment. They've added a lot of new counsellors and they've expanded open times. But still, all they provide people at best is 6 weeks of counselling. And what you're finding with a lot of people is they're prepared to talk to people who are maybe just having what you would consider your average university exam stress. But a lot of the time 6 weeks is enough time to open a problem and really go in depth and then have no closure for people. And they're actually almost producing more problems at this point, very well intentionally. But I think it's just the fact that they do not realise the scale of the problem. And of course, from their perspective, they're a university. They're here to teach us. They're not here to treat us. And that's the NHS's problem. But all over the place, we're just too stowed out.
Sorry, I think in terms of the NHS in Newcastle and across the country, we're being crippled by austerity measures in various forms by this government, which is then putting more pressure onto the universities in their services, which aren't being funded correctly by any of means, and especially at Newcastle, it's one of the worst performing, sadly, in the country. But that's directly linked to the strategy that we have, across the board of rampant austerity, where the people with mental health difficulties do suffer continuously, and you're just being turned into a cog. Really, you're not being looked at as a whole person holistically. It's that kind of, the university can do as much as it can within this, this privatised system, but there's much bigger issues around the politics of that that I'm going to discuss in a workshop as well tomorrow.
What were you saying about
Sorry, I just want to keep. You had your hand up a few times, Dave.
Yeah, I kind of feel it's like it's the social media stuff. I just kind of quickly want to go back to that. I think it's really interesting you said it's an addiction. What about social media do you symptomise as an addiction? Is it the amount of followers? Is it the numbers? Is it comparison? Is it an identity looking online? What do you think it is as an addiction? Why do you think it?
I think it's that neurological thing of, like, for example, you know, getting a like and that kind of dopamine in the brain, that reaction. Yeah. It's purely on that level, at a base really, of and wanting more and more attention that we're reacting to. And when people aren't getting this, you know, depression's kicking in and lack of self-esteem. And
it's almost like the amount of likes you get is like your self-worth or how happy you should be. And, yeah.
Like I said, I do psychology, and we've just done a study on Tinder, which is quite interesting. And we basically just did loads of interviews and talked to people, and we're sort of just interested in about like how people interact. But a lot of the interviews brought up like this sort of need for self-validation, and like they would end up getting addicted to Tinder even if they weren't actually that interested in finding a relationship and stuff, just because like you get notified that you got a match and like, oh, I'm attractive, like, oh, thank God, and then you'd have to keep on doing it because you need this constant sort of like, oh, I'm still good.
I'm good enough. I'm good enough.
Like,
Yeah.
Weirdly though, I think there's something to be said for like self-moderation with media, because like I've noticed like lately, whenever I open up Facebook, my mood just drops. So I just say to myself, think to myself, well, why am I opening it? You know, what do I need from that? And I'm just, you know, I'm putting a ban on it. I only use it if there's a specific group in there. Really, I don't even like to have Facebook. I just join specific mental health groups, which are quite helpful. And I do think media there is some bad points to it, but tying in the lady's question before about mental health services, I've had quite a few different mental health services in Gateshead, Newcastle, and I live in South Shields and South Tyneside as well. And funnily enough, actually, I think social media has helped me more than all of them have. It's particularly with dealing with an eating disorder. The body positive movement on Instagram has really helped me. And without them and following other people's accounts who are trying to recover from an eating disorder and encouraging other people to, like, you know, just simple things like eat more and just focusing on self-esteem and things. Whereas even when I had counselling for an eating disorder, she was not as helpful as the body positive movement on Instagram. And I actually attribute most of my recovery to specific individuals on Instagram who have been really influential in helping my self-esteem. And as I was saying to you before about, I also have a group on Facebook for people who take fluoxetine, the medicine I'm on, and that has been really helpful for me as well, just talking to people about side effects, hopeful stories of it getting better, just chatting to other people who are in the same boat. Sometimes I do think there's lots of wrong things with social media, and I have to say for my self-esteem, sometimes I think you need to take a social media break, or I've deleted Instagram for months and months and Facebook just because they've made me feel so ill seeing all these images, and Photoshop doesn't help as well. But I actually think you need to learn to moderate it and try and find those positive niches instead of, like, what I did, I unfollowed everyone who talked about food, everyone who posted their bikini bodies, everyone who was just pretty negative, people who I delete all my friends on Facebook who I no longer talk to, who I just had on as friends, and like making my whole social media platform more honest, truthful, relatable, positive. I think that's actually really helped me, and I think a lot of people are affected by the likes and the followers and are just surrounded by things that aren't really real anymore. You know, you've got like my cousin has 2,000 friends on Facebook, but his mum actually died 2 years ago, and he didn't really have that many people to talk to. And it's like, well, you've got 2,000 followers, but you know what I mean? He felt lonely, and I just think we need to like retrack it back into like having it as a personal like social media hub rather than something that's, you know, trying to get likes and a big following and everything. And I think that's where it starts going wrong.
So that's really interesting, because the implication there is there's no help for the cure, like if you've got to crisis point.
Yeah.
However, to prevent you from getting to crisis point, social media can be effective.
Yeah, it's actually, I do think it has helped me. I think it has both bad points. I think in one way, I mean, I'm not really sure about the other aspects of my mental health, like anxiety and things, but with an eating disorder, I think social media can both cause problems, but also if you flip it and try and focus on things that are trying to help people. Because Instagram especially has a lot of accounts of people who are going through mental health. I've found in the last 2-3 years, so many people on Instagram are talking about mental health. There's specific accounts focused on mental health, accounts that give you like positive messages every day, and to me they're the ones we should be focusing on, not the ones that are like spreading negativity. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of positivity on social media. You just have to find it and get through all the bits that can be problematic. But I think all the accounts that I follow and stuff like that now are ones that actually will make me feel good, or like are just, even if it's nothing to do with mental health, but they're just being honest and they're just not being like fake about it.
Yeah,
Just
I don't know,
feels
things
more
that make you happy,
normal.
like accounts of puppies and stuff.
yeah,
Like
actually I have a folder in my phone called Cute Animals for Bad Days. Whenever I see a cute animal video on Instagram, I put it in, and then if I have one of those days where I feel like I can't get out of bed, I literally scroll through hundreds of cute videos of like little ferrets. It sounds weird, but it really makes my day, just little things like that.
It's Vine compilations. If I'm feeling down, whack on a 40-minute Vine compilation with your writer's rain. Yeah.
Is there any more questions?
I think we've got to remember that social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, is still relatively new technology. It's been around 10-20 years. And for the human race, it's been around, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the human race has been around for thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of, 5-10 years, you've got these new technologies.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the story, potentially it's almost like the legend of Pandora's box almost. You know, the legend of Pandora's box?
Yeah.
Potentially it's almost like that. It can be, at the moment, we're still going through the development and coping thing about finding what social media is, and that kind of thing, which is, it can be difficult to come to terms with because we don't really know whether you're, also people of my, there's not many people of my generation can actually cope with, I can cope with social media, sort of. Ish. But most people my age, they find it very difficult to cope with certain aspects of social media, and it's also about when it comes to like university and the traditions of university. So you've got the traditions of universities which potentially date back 100, 200. If you go back other universities like Cambridge, it goes back to the 1200s. So on the one hand, you've got a tradition which dates back several hundred years, and then you've got which is an ancient system, and then on the other hand, you've got a system that's only been on, and it's trying to come to terms with, trying to like almost put them together, which is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I'm not saying it's easy, it's difficult.
Like there's still studies going on, like as you were saying about Tinder and everything, there's still so many studies on how the social media affects us. So I do think it's like a whole new thing. Like even my dad, he's 47 and he won't even touch Facebook or anything. He's just like, I'm not doing it, it's fake. He doesn't want anything to do with it. Whereas my grandma, who's nearly 80, she's all over Facebook and everything. Like, I mean, she still hasn't worked out how to send private messages. She somehow managed to send private messages on your public wall, which is sometimes funny. But like, I don't know, I just think, yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but I do agree with you that we're still kind of evolving with
trying to ground ourselves still maybe with it, because like you said, sort of like the old world and the new world, it's sort of like meshing us together in a healthy way. Maybe we're overwhelmed by it.
Even 10, 20 years, even 20 years ago, the idea and the concept that somebody can message each other across the world instantaneously, whether it's Australia or, you know, like, when I was, that's so age. When I was a lad, you know, they were like, and I was 1970s, it was the idea of mobile phones didn't exist. Even, you know, like, when I was around, there was only 3 TV channels, and of course, for my generation to actually cope with that, when I grew up, it was like 3 TV channels, but all there's only two. There's only 2 TV. So for the older people, they can find it very. And then you've got all these new young upstarts who've got this. It's difficult. It's difficult for the older people, but it's also difficult for the younger people because they came up they came up and they've got all this.
Yeah.
It's almost like a flood. It's almost like a flood of. It's almost like a flood, isn't it? It's a flood of ideas and concepts and this, that, the other. And
it's like we're surrounded by screens.
Exactly, and we're not really.
Everyone should watch Black Mirror.
Yeah, Black Mirror, get on it.
Or use Twitter.
My younger brother's 13. Internet and social media, he has all of them, and it is second nature.
Yeah.
And he's not even like 6-7 years younger than me, and I'm still not like, that's crazy. Whereas, and he'll be rolling his eyes at my parents who don't understand how to use Facebook, and it's just like.
That's exactly what I mean.
The panel's just about to end, so if anyone has a final question for us to talk about, yes, it was one, wasn't it?
I do, because discussion about social media is interesting, which means not relevant. Just not relevant. And I'm not going to even explore that because we haven't got time. One thing I do want to ask is, what do you mean by mental health? Because part of our discussion has been about demanding as consumers more therapy, more counselling, more funding. On the other hand, I think that the point that you made about regulating your own access and exposure, about self-help, about maybe consciousness raising, which we used to have in the 70s around sexuality and psychiatry, puts the control back in our hands. I'm not saying people don't have crises and don't need sometimes support or even some kind of critical analysis that can be useful. But you can get that from prayers, sometimes. I'm just asking the question about defining ourselves in terms of mental health, that phrase, in terms of recovery or treatment or somehow dealing with it with the help of experts, is a tragic and unnecessary step to take.
Sorry, I'd like to pick up on that. What I meant when I said before about more funding and on a government level and educational services is that we're in a very privileged position to even sit here and discuss mental health and, to have the knowledge and understanding to formalise these opinions. And there's so many in our society alone that don't get that opportunity. And if we don't think this is for everyone, instead of the individuals who've been lucky enough, it turns into a kind of self-reverential activity of a different class of people, or the educated. So as a society, we need to analyse, as you say in mental health, what it is, and everyone having access to it.
Yeah, I think a big question that came up last year throughout all the panels, and I think kind of reflected this, I think what you were talking about, how you're kind of coming from this standpoint, which was very much more engaged with the kind of anti-psychiatry movement that was going on there. I think that a big question that always came up was this issue of diagnosis and treatment, and whether people thought that that was actually helpful or whether it was too emphasised, and whether it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fact that so many people, when they were having problems, felt quite logically that the best reason to go to the GP, get a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, get some medication, was also necessarily something that was sort of isolating, and that to an extent, if we not only try and, because I think it's an agreed thing that mental health services all over at university with the NHS are overstretched at the moment and underfunded, but also trying to increase kind of the infrastructure that we have socially and look after each other, because to an extent what we're doing is also just medicalising sort of normal human responses to difficult situations. And I think...
I'm gay disabled, and I would fight against anyone trying to medicalise my sexuality. And I hate the domination of the medical profession in terms of the medical model of disability. So why should I embrace it in terms of mental health? It's contradictory.
I would actually agree there, but I know there are different perspectives.
I'm sorry. Very quick question. We're meant to finish a couple of minutes ago, but very quick, yeah.
So you guys have learned a lot in your years. Do you have a way to take that knowledge to the freshers in September and give them some do's and don'ts and every now and then this how about this this type of social media?
Or also what could the university do or do more to help people in the community?
Prevent
do think the university are trying to help in a way in that societies, we did get an email around to all the society leaders saying that they had to limit their drinking socials because of drinking being a problem. We also, I'll give it a go, have a lot of outdoor activities. I remember in my first year we ended up going kayaking, paintballing, you can sign up to all those kind of things. And so they try and do remove you from drinking. Drinking seems to be more of like your flatmates kind of do it. But in terms of helping first years, I'm not really sure how that really works other than trying to get them into groups like Mind the Gap, because people seem to, they learn from experience. You know, I've told like my younger sister who's now joined, I'm in second year, should technically be in third year for my age, but my sister's now in first year and she's totally different to me, total party animal and drinking, and I said to her like, you know, you don't need to get into peer pressure and drinking, and it's not really a good route to go down for university, because I think a lot of people use it as a coping mechanism, but her, like everyone else, they're going to want to figure that out themselves, aren't they? A lot of people go to college and are excited to go to university because they're going to go drinking and partying. So I think people, you can tell them all you want about how that might not really end up well. They're going to do that they're going to work that out themselves. But I do think that there needs to be a space like Mind the Gap for people to come to and realise that actually this whole idea of what university is doesn't have to be what they think. So as you were saying before, the whole university is the best time of your life thing, I think that is a huge pressure, and I think that needs to be totally removed, because yes, it can be really, I do enjoy it now, but when I was at a different university, it made me feel awful that this was meant to be the best time of my life, and being depressed at that time, you're thinking, well, if this is the best time of my life, what on earth have I got to look forward to? Because I was, you know, you get really down. Whereas now, I'm actually really enjoying it. You know, I'm out doing more things, and so I think it's more about trying to get people to like learn about themselves more. I don't think people are taught to learn about themselves. It's more about following a crowd. But I think that's what really helps people to like evolve into people who know what's good for them, what's bad for them, kind of thing. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but...
Well, wrap it up there because we've run 5 minutes over. There's a break now until 12:15, and then there's going to be the LGBT panel running in here in kind of the same format. And there's going to be, in the Case AD room just down there, a workshop on psychosis. And in the lounge, if you want to check it out during the break or at lunch, there's stalls from a few different local charities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, guys. That was cool.